Yes, good afternoon, my fans out there. I'm your chemistry lecturer on social media. My name remains Dr. D.I. June. Um, our last lecture was on general gas equation. I told you general gas equation is derived or obtained by the combination of both Boyle's law and Sartre's law. And we define general gas equation by saying that it is the product of the pressure and volume divided by the temperature, absolute temperature. So PV all over T is a constant. And we also ended up by saying that the general gas equation shows a relationship between three important parameters. And these are the volume, the pressure, and temperature. And then right away, I want to talk about a topic I titled Analysis and derivation of variables in general gas equation. Analysis and derivation of variables in general gas equation. I did mention sometime before in my last lecture that you can define general gas equation by simply giving the correct equation like this: P1 V1 all over T1 is equal to P2 V2 all over T2. Of course, we know that this is initial pressure, initial volume, initial temperature, final pressure, final volume, final temperature of the gas. Now, from this level, we want to know, I want you to know that each of these three parameters can be calculated for or can be determined. An examiner can set a question in a way that basically calculate for the initial temperature or initial pressure or initial volume. It can equally say, okay, calculate for the final pressure or the final volume or the final temperature. All these parameters could be requested for or to be calculated for by an examiner. So if you are asked to do so, what will you do? So I want you to know that these parameters or variables could be determined or could be calculated for mathematically. And that is what I want to let you know. Now, at this level, the big question is how? How do we do that? Now, let's go by doing this. Step one, consider the equation. This equation here. Step one, try to know the equation for the general gas equation, which is P1 V1 over T1 equal to P2 V2 over T2. Fine. Once I've gotten to that level, the step two, what I'm going to do is to cross multiply. Now I duplicated this equation here. This is here. We are multiplying, it means P1 V1 multiplying T2. And then T1 multiplying P2 V2. That's what you have here now. P1 V1 T2, P1 V1 T2 equal to P2 V2 T1. So if you cross multiply, this is what I'm going to get. Now, step three, at this level that you have done cross multiplication, you can now determine or calculate for any of the variables that you may be asked to determine. So now that means if we are taking from this equation now, if we are taking P1 now, that is you asked to calculate the initial pressure, we are now taking the P1 out as the subset of the equation. It means you divide all other sides by V1 T2. That's what you have here. So P1 is equal to P2 V2 P2 V21 all over T1 C V1 V2, that is here. Then B, you're looking for the initial volume. It will be P2 V2 T1 all over P1 T2. If you are asked to calculate for the final temperature of the gas, it means you have P2 V2 T1 all over P1 V1. Then, if peradventure you are asked to calculate the final pressure of the gas, from this equation now, that is what I'm doing all this. From this equation, it means P1 V1 T2 all over V2 T1. If you are asked to find the final volume, it will be now P1 V1 T2 all over P2 T1. Then, if you are asked to find the initial temperature of the gas, it will now become equal to P1 V1 T2 all over P2 V2. Of course, when we say P2 V2 T1, it means final pressure multiplied by final volume multiplied by initial temperature. That's what it means here. All over the initial volume times the final temperature. So you can do also the same for all of them. So when a equation is given to you, by the time you determine the parameters, after putting them aside, then remember this equation. Then cross multiply, you will have this level. At this step, look for the parameter you are asked to find out, and then make the other side of it as the subject, and then eliminate it by dividing it by this other side. When you have done that, you can calculate any of the variables. So I derived all these formulas from this particular equation at a cross multiply. So, like it, comment, and also share this video. And please remember to always subscribe to my YouTube channel.